Melody, it's so great to have you here today. Thank you so much for coming out and speaking with us.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
So you were the first Black female forester in the
Mhm.
USDA Forest Service back in 1977.
77.
Now we're in 2025. How many Black
Yes.
female foresters are there?
I don't know this year, but I
Mhm.
can tell you in 2020, there were 6. And the Forest Service wouldn't tell me. I had to go to Senator Tim Kaine and get him to write a letter to the Forest Service and say, tell me how many Black female foresters there are. I was with the Forest Service for 28 years. But I didn't want to be a forester when I began my career. I love zoology and animals, and I really wanted to work outside in research with them. But my mom had passed away by the time I went to college. We had just mounting medical bills. And then my grandmother was ill and on her deathbed, essentially. So I knew I had to be able to pay for those bills. And the Forest Service offered me a permanent job. But they didn't want me to be a wildlife biologist or a zoologist. They wanted their first Black female forester. So I always tell people, yes, I was hired because I was a Black female, but I wouldn't have been promoted and kept with the Forest Service if I wasn't doing a super job.
Absolutely.
So that's a little bit about my background. I worked all over the United States, in Africa and South America for a little bit, tiny bit in Australia. But I really, my love as a forester is large scale watershed restoration. That was my last job with the Forest Service.
Can you tell me a little bit about what you did over your time with the USDA Forest Service?
Yes. I started in 1977 with an intern program where I got to do everything over summer. The summer quarter where I was not going to summer school, I spent with the Forest Service. And it was wonderful. I did recreation, fire, silviculture, which is how you grow trees essentially, logging, super tree seed collection, where I would climb up 150 or 200 feet on those old growth trees to collect seeds
Incredible.
from the cones. It was just wonderful. I loved it. And as an aside, just the view from the top of those trees. I was in the Cascade Mountains and it was beautiful. Those are my favorite memories of being in the Forest Service. The views that I got to put into my memory and carry with me forever. I see being in the woods as sacred space. It's where I see my God and I feel most close to my God. So starting in old growth forests in the Pacific Northwest on the Skykomish Ranger District really gave me a love for everything that the Forest Service did. So I went back to school that fall and I said, my goodness, I love the Forest Service. Let me stay with them forever.
Yeah.
But then my next time back with the Forest Service, I spent 6 months and they had me only doing timber sale layout, which is taking the same measurements thousands of times. Very monotonous, very boring. So I said, I'm going to switch my major back to wildlife management. And the Forest Service said, well, then you're going to lose your job. So I left it in forest management, my major, and just made it through. But they knew that they were going to lose me if they didn't give me something where I could use my brain. So then I got to do genetics and tree improvement. I laid out 4 progeny test sites where you collect seeds that are from trees with phenotypic or characteristics that you can see. Like the tree is very straight or produces lots of cones or it's taller than its neighbors. So those are the trees we collect seeds from and then grow seedlings and then put them in a plantation with markers on them so we can see which trees produce the best wood or seeds or whatever we want to produce. So I did that for several years. And I was getting so tired with, again, taking the same measurements. So I went to Southern California and I did forester information specialist work, where I would write news articles and work with the media as a public affairs forester. And then I went to Northern California as an assistant district ranger doing all line officer work where I was making decisions. So from there, I went to Florida and I worked for a while and I really loved it. I was a timber management assistant and I worked with wildlife finally. And I really loved it there, but there was a promotion that came open here in DC. And our headquarters is at 14th and Independence. I say ours still out of habit. The Forest Service headquarters is at 14th and Independence. So I applied for a job as a GS 1213 position, which means that you get automatically promoted to a 13, GS 13. And I was selected.
So your story is full of the need for strength and courage.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about where you draw from to get your strength and courage?
I can. My middle name, Starya, is my Cherokee name. It means stay strong. I'm a quarter Cherokee American. I'm also a Christian. And those two seem like they wouldn't go together, but Indigenous people are very spiritual and see God in everything, as do I. So I get a lot of my strength just from my spirituality. Also, I really want to make a difference for the next person. Certainly the next person of color, certainly the next woman, but everybody.
So you have a Cherokee Indigenous background,
Yes.
As well as a Western science background.
Yes.
So how do you experience the difference in worldview between your Cherokee and Indigenous background versus the way that you were maybe trained in Western science?
They're different. They're very different. But I do see natural resources as sacred. I do see the land as sacred. So I can take that science knowledge that I was trained in and apply it to protecting these resources that I hold so dear. I need the science and I need the love for the land in order to be the best forester I can be and not just go out and say, cut, 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 or let me get as many cattle on the land as I can. Don't worry about the water quality or how they're degrading the stream banks or how they're putting fecal material in the streams.
Yeah.
That's a worry because the Forest Service and other agencies don't charge enough, in my opinion, for the permits to have cattle on the land. And they're certainly not going to have the staff now to go out and monitor those range permits, as they're called. We need people on the ground to see where those cattle are, to see where those trees are being cut, and monitor the effect on the environment. So I worry about that a lot too with the current administration and the direction that the Secretary of Agriculture has been given and is given to its agencies. The new Secretary of Agriculture, Rollins, she is concerned about getting the cut out. That worries me as well because she is saying to the National Forest, here's your cut, here's your target. You've got to do it. If you can't do it, then someone else can. Either we need to give this national forest to private lands of state foresters or other organizations, or you need to be fired. We need to bring somebody else in that will get that cut out. And you know what overharvesting timber does to water quality.
Absolutely.
It's horrible. It's the last thing we should be doing. And the Environmental Protection Act and other laws that are in place to protect the environment are being rolled back. So I worry right now about the environment, about water quality. I have a lot of worries right now. But
what's top of your list of worries right now?
The loss of diversity, equity, and inclusion positions.
Yeah.
Because unless we have the best and the brightest of every category, if you will, every gender, every race, every sexual orientation, we've got to have the best and the brightest of everybody to address these big, big environmental challenges we have, like global climate change, for example, like the wildland fires that are sterilizing the land and making the soils hydrophobic so that the soils and the water just run off into the streams and the rivers. All of that. We've got to have everybody at the table, and not just at the table, but having a voice, being heard.
What would you say that your advice is for young people that want to work in the outdoor industry?
Well, I think they definitely should work in the outdoor industry, work with natural resource conservation, because it takes all of us having a voice. And with different experiences, we bring a different voice.
Mm-hmm.
So many of these organizations and agencies have a dearth of people of color, for example, have a dearth of women who have been allowed to have the same experiences as the men have. So I'm always encouraged to see young people choosing this as a profession. And my greatest advice is to have a mentor. It's so important, especially in today's world, to have someone with that experience
Mm-hmm.
who can guide and counsel a young person.
In what ways do forests contribute to people's lives in ways that are invisible to them?
So many ways. It's sacred space to me and to so many other people now are going out. You've heard of forest bathing.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that I do regularly to help my clinical depression.
Mm-hmm.
Just going out and being there. Forests provide habitat for so many animals that we don't even think of.
Mm-hmm.
I saw porcupines in old growth forest. You wouldn't think of that. Yes, fragmentation is a real problem. For regeneration of our forest stands, even, we need a certain amount of acreage in order for them to be able to naturally reproduce. But we're building houses and these McMansions out
Mm-hmm.
in nature
Mm-hmm.
where habitat, even deer habitat, we say in Arlington, I know that there are way too many deer. Well, there aren't too many deer. There are too many houses in deer habitat.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I look at it. But people prevail every time when working with natural resource conservation. I think that's got to change.
Yeah.
We're fragmenting these habitats so much that we're losing species.
I'm curious about this idea of succession. So, what do we need for future forests to be able to regenerate and renew themselves? And how do you see that as parallel to what the human species needs to regenerate and renew itself?
Space.
Mm.
To me, the biggest thing the species need is space. And I think people need to get out in nature, not just be urban people.
Mm-hmm.
Because even if it's not a holy place to a person, just being out there listening to birds, for example, Rock Creek Park, right in the middle of the biggest urban place you could think of, can be a sacred space because of nature. The way it's laid out is just beautiful
Mm-hmm.
because it's a resource that's right there in the middle of a city
Mm-hmm.
that is not too hard to get to. And all of the parks and green space that we have around here. Oh, it's just beautiful.
What do forests do to protect water?
The roots, it starts with the very roots, and they're like a sieve. They strain the some of the chemicals uh, right out of the water before it gets into the river itself or
Mm-hmm.
the stream or the creek or whatever it is. And then trees absorb water, so they help hold water on the land and again sieve it before it goes into those resources.
Mm-hmm.
We have watersheds everywhere on the planet. And I believe, it's just my opinion, that the United States is doing a great job in trying to bring those watersheds back. In the Pacific Northwest, where I was trained, there is a lot of clear cutting, which I understand clear cutting because some species, like Douglas fir, won't regenerate in shady environments. They have to have that full sun.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't have to do 1,000-acre clear cuts. We can manage the size of those silvicultural practices so that we don't lose water quality
Mm-hmm.
and don't lose our soils. A lot of work that the trees will do is holding our soils in place so that we don't have more particulates in the water. If we have the particulates in the water, the sun or any light source will heat up those particulates and make the water temperature itself too warm for wildlife. After I was promoted to a large scale watershed restoration position, I really fell in love with water quality and wanted to do everything I can to make a difference. We really lost so much of our water quality in the 60s and then the 70s with the hippies coming into focus, if you will. We started to be concerned about water quality. And we are making some gains with the Potomac, right?
Yes.
But we still have a long way to go, and it takes all of us to make a difference, don't you think?
Absolutely. Potomac Conservancy is passionate about protecting the water by protecting the forest. And so by protecting the land and what happens on the land, that's how we do our best work to ensure that water quality stays really high. Can I ask you a fun question?
Yes, please.
Melody, what's your favorite tree?
Flowering dogwood.
Okay,
I
why?
love them. They're so pretty. I have one actually, Benjamin Banneker Park, that's up in Catonsville. The state forester for Maryland planted a flowering dogwood in my honor. And they're beautiful in the spring. They're beautiful in the fall. I think the leaves are so pretty. I really love them so much.
And you said you have a zoology, wildlife management background, even if you didn't finish that degree.
Yes.
I'm curious if you have a favorite animal. What's your favorite forest creature?
I love an otter so much. That cute little face and those little feet and the way they eat and clean things and can put a rock on their chest while they're floating and open a clam. I just think they're wonderful. They're so cute.
Why do you enjoy living in the Potomac River region?
I think the Potomac is so beautiful. Looking at parks like Great Falls and seeing the river and the locks and everything. I don't like dams too much, but I know why they used the locks in the past. But just seeing that river, it's so beautiful. And having it be so accessible, you don't have to be rich to see the Potomac or to see a creek or to go to a park in this area. My favorite, I love Great Falls, of course, but I love Upton Hill, which is a small park in Arlington, Virginia, where I take my Boys and Girls Club members just so that they can see a park or learn to measure a tree, learn to do a little orienteering where they learn to use a compass and a tape, 100-foot tape. And I buy this equipment myself so that I can show them how to use those things, or an increment board to tell how old a tree is. And these things really interest these kids who are primarily urban kids and don't get to go out in parks.
Are there any final thoughts that you have that you'd like to share with us?
One is just that I am so passionate about supporting young people and getting them outside and interested in careers in natural resource conservation. They need to see people who look like them to know that they can do it. I didn't have people who looked like me, and it made it really, really tough as a pioneer. So I think all of us, especially you, as a very intelligent natural resource conservationist, I'm so proud of you for doing your part with Potomac Conservancy and just being a master naturalist, master gardener, all of these things, and your willingness to share that knowledge with youth. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It takes all of us, Alexis. It really does, doesn't it?
It does.
And I'm 67 years old. I just turned 67. Till my dying death, I will be taking youth out in the woods or out in a desert to see the vegetation there or wherever it might be.
Yeah.
And just to grow that love of nature within them. It's not hard if we take them out and show them some things.
Melody, thank you so much for sharing your story and for the incredible legacy that you've created.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and talking with me. This has been a truly beautiful conversation. I appreciate it.